All right, cool.
Vercingetorix.
I think we're good on
It is.
It's a cartoon.
It's a
Asterix
person.
and
Asterix and Obelix is a cartoon. Yeah.
Based on Vercingetorix.
But he was a real guy.
Vercingetorix.
Oui, oui. Oh, bonjour. Welcome to the dude. Où est la comic book?
Monsieur, où est mon comique?
Où est la comique? C'est combine.
Dieu, t'es là. C'est moi, t'es comique.
by Bing Chiling.
We're not doing that.
We're not
one.
doing that one. That's
I did cut that out of the last episode.
Sorry, you
by the
guys
way.
don't speak Mandarin.
Big chilling. Anyways,
Like
welcome
Mander
to.
out.
Yeah, let's cut that out. Let's cut that Mandarin out.
all right.
My name's Jack. I took French in high school and have coasted on that ever since.
My name's Wyatt. Really sort of the thought leader of the comic book.
Yep, thought leader.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. Something of an autodidact. Oh, I wish we could start over, but it's too late. Welcome.
I'm also Jack. I learned Spanish in college and now teach it. I taught Wyatt Esperanto because he thought that would be a useful language. Thank you for being here with us today. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros, amigos.
I also am Trip, and I took French in high school, and my French teacher said I'd do nothing with my life, and I'm sad to say he was right.
Here you are,
Look
But
at
it
you
wasn't
doing
a comic book
doing a comic club.
podcast.
And the thing was, it has nothing to do with your lack of French ability. You know?
Oh no, my French was excellent.
Yeah, right? I mean,
Magnifique.
so joke's on him. You know, you were going to fail anyway.
Yeah. Regardless of my French capability.
It's like looking at a fish and being like, oh, I bet you're going to swim around the rest of your life.
I've been meaning to pass this by you guys. I think what we should do is pretend like this is our entire job and everything rests on the fact that we get good views on this comic book.
Do you guys have
You're
jobs?
pretending?
we're doing a Hail Mary with this.
We forgot to introduce. I don't know what's your moniker going to be this week.
This is John Bon Jovi, famous rocker from the
Celebrity
80s.
guest John Bon Jovi.
I like that John Bon Jovi introduces himself as a famous rocker from the 80s.
Yes, he does. And he has diabetes, which you probably all know.
Type 1 or 2.
Both, 1 and 2.
Dang.
So really type 3.
Yeah. Vault beyond.
And I'd like to say that this is brought to you by the Mormon Church. Not creepy and weird.
Yeah. Also, watch The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives season 2. That's on.
Also brought by the Mormon Church.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's,
Just like they say in the Mormon church, put on your temple underwear.
Mormonism.
That is what they say.
Mormonism. It's pretty cool.
It's
they
pretty
don't do
cool.
a ton of polyamory, but they do beat their wives.
But it's cool.
That's
We
fine.
don't do a ton of polyamory,
And they
but don't worry, you can still have fun.
They traffic children, but not for sex, for labor.
Yeah.
It's different.
Mormonism. It's like weird Protestantism, but the refugees are the
It's just
missionaries are nicer. I
But you
guess.
also
little more
can't drink
recent.
coffee. So
Yeah.
for some reason, they all have a bunch of soda bars everywhere. If you
Mormonism. We'll see you soon.
Mormonism.
Mormonism, you'll be sorry once you get to heaven. You realize we're right.
Don't worry, your family never liked you anyway.
And for this week, we read Invincible.
Invincible.
So
With a very Mormon name of the main character,
Mark
Grayson.
Grayson.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a pretty Mormon name.
And
And there's a Mormon license plate in it.
oh, really?
When Mark's dad, the famous Viltrunite, meets Mark's mom, someone's throwing a car on her, and the
Utah license plate.
It's not a Utah license plate. It says like "I'm one, are you?" It's a Mormon.
I'm one,
reference.
are you? Is
Wait,
that
that's
really?
It's a famous. I mean, growing up in Salt Lake, as John Bon Jovi did, that was a very famous. I'm a Mormon license plate.
You used to have a shirt with a license plate that said like "I'm one, are you?" on it.
Yes,
didn't you?
John Bon Jovi did have that.
Yeah, that's
That's such a funny thing because I love the idea of someone just being like pedophile. It's like no, Mormon.
Yes, but that's not what I'm advertising.
And
Hey, like I said, they traffic children for labor.
yeah.
It's legally distinct, okay?
So,
Anyways,
last week we read in part of our Robert Kirk May series, we read The Walking Dead, issues 1 through 6. And let me tell you, we died reading it. It was a walking...
More like the shocking dredge.
yeah.
Damn.
Like-
Well done. 1 out of every 10, you're going to nail it. That was it.
Like a
trail.
batting average.
Now-
if I'm batting 30%, that's 100% right there.
Feels good to go over to some of Kirkman's
other work.
other work because Robert Kirkman, I hope you hear this. This is the greatest comic that's been written in the 21st century.
I think that's fair.
I think that it's my favorite comic book. I have a lot of good usually when we read we got critiques. I don't have a ton out there. I have some later on, but for this set, just a little bit about what went on. You know, you go through Mark becoming a superhero, getting his flying for the first time, getting super strength, going through high school, touring college, up through the point where you realize that his dad, Omni-Man, is actually evil.
Mormon.
He in a weird way he is Mormon-like because in Mormon Afterlife you get your own planet. He is he is the number one. He's the
that's
guy.
true.
Or is
Yeah.
that Scientology?
No, that's
Yeah,
not.
that's
no, it's
Mormonism.
Mormon.
Yeah, so he's basically a space Mormon. He did really well.
In fact, they're all kind of Mormons.
They
'cause they're
all wear
wearing
similar
funky
clothes,
underwear.
weird
Yeah,
fucking clothes.
they all wear the same. They all wear the same clothes.
They all have
Well,
powers.
hold on. Omni-Man has sex for fun. He can't be Mormon.
I think you can do that when you're
Yeah.
Mormon.
No, you can be
Oh,
more.
I mean, a guy Mormon can
He's
have a lot of
married.
sex
Yeah.
for fun.
He's married.
What's weird
Yeah.
is that
He does get another wife later on.
the
True, he
Elisa
does
Elisa
practice
had sex for
polyamory.
fun, which is the woman Viltrumite.
Probably
so.
not.
We're not going to talk about
Yeah.
her, are we?
No, we
Stick
don't
to
need
the
get
structure.
there. So
Stick to
yeah,
the structure.
So we get up through the point where you've realized that the Viltrumites are trying to take over the whole galaxy. But maybe someone would want to say something about what Invincible is in a more broad sense. I don't feel like I did a good job.
It's a coming of age story where you start off with Mark, and he's this young kid who's starry eyed and he doesn't quite understand how the world works, but it's played through the lens of him being a superhero, and he doesn't really understand how dangerous it is and the reality of the larger universe.
And if we want someone to do a good job of explaining what this comic is, I think I can take a crack at that.
That was a good job.
It's so mean.
oh,
I thought
Sorry.
he did a good job.
I'll
yeah.
give this to B.
He did do a good
Yeah,
job.
I would say in a larger scope, what makes this special and what would draw a reader to it is that it takes like everything that a comic is in its medium and makes great use of it. The cool aspect of comics is that you can read them for 5 years and see the characters grow alongside, like while you grow as a person. So you start out with Mark who's in high school, and I think by the end of the comic he's like 30. So this is a story of a. It
He
is a coming
he
of
is
age
500.
stories.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Did I say 30?
Said 30.
He looks
That's basically
like
the
he's
You were,
same.
only
Once you get
you were only 470 years off. That's
Hey,
not that
spoiler alert, we haven't all read 500,
500
years of
in
Mark.
the ground, maybe.
It's a comic that takes if you strip everything away and you have a structure, it's the story of a boy becoming a man.
And becoming wolves.
It's special because you don't have to worry about reading 300 other issues tying in, and you don't have to worry about what's the key moment thing from Across Spider-Verse.
Mary Jane gets her next name.
Canon
events.
You don't have to worry about canon events, having to know that going in. So you can, it's kind of as if it makes me want this. I want Batman. I want every other comic to be this, just to be able to read Batman start to finish and have a wonderful end point for Batman where I don't have to see 9 other authors rebooting what he's done to to like be like, well, what if he was, gay in the 90s? Like we don't have to deal with that. You just
What
have
if
Mark.
he was?
I think, and like
you have
my
a
favorite
problem with
part, obviously, like later down the road, that's kind of like what really draws me to Invincible is like it does have an ending and it sort of lets characters like drift off. But like I think what I love about the beginning of this is like it doesn't have to do the legwork of like this is what this guy does, this is what this guy does, this is who this guy is. It's like no, you kind of understand like superhero tropes. It's like that's a robot, and like you can understand like how they work and function, but that's not like as important as like who they are as characters and how that informs them. Like you see like the teen team, and you see all of these characters who you're like, I don't really need an explanation on like how Rexplode gets his powers. Rexplode is Rexplode, and you're like, okay, there's a like understanding with the audience that it's like you guys have seen this before. We're using this to explore Mark's kind of coming of age, and it's like a way more like streamlined version of a lot of those in a way that like kind of cuts the fat and gets you to the points that like you're actually like, oh, this is the best parts of superhero comics.
It's a very lean story.
I'm going to introduce a $10 word, but I think it's useful here. You guys know what syncretism is?
The idea of multiple things impacting each other and laying on top of each other over time.
Yeah, it's
to
like
build one cohesive structure.
It's the merging of like different philosophies or different art forms into something that has its own internal structure. I think what he does is basically it's like a syncretic model of comics as a genre. And I think that's why this sings so well to me. He's got the literally like the guys from Star Trek in it, the Justice League.
There's even scenes of them wearing the uniform. Like
Charlie Brown.
Yeah, Charlie Brown.
The
Rorschach's in it.
Rorschach. So like basically over the past 80 years,
Savage Dragon's in it.
Yeah.
Well, he's actually
He's literally in it.
Over the past 80 years, comics have like, developed many different tropes and forms, some of them like the Justice League, others are more like storytelling devices, like inclusion of multiverses, things like that. And like
how did the Justice League people not sue them? Because they were just so clearly the Justice League.
And they weren't around for long
Intentionally
enough to. They weren't around for long because they were introduced and killed off like in that.
I know, but
same
it's
breath.
still IP, right? I mean, there's still like. Guy's, like Darkwing or whatever his name is, was Batman.
Aquarius.
I think like you can't like copyright an idea. Like you can copyright like the symbols and like
in
I
the
think
design, the character designs.
overall it would also be like probably bad manners to be like we're gonna sue you, like us DC who has like an infinitely recognizable character is gonna sue this guy for being like I want to make a Batman pastiche. Like
I bet they would.
Issue is like it's
they
not as
got to get their money.
they were making. There was never any competition for the immortal toy outselling Superman.
And it
Like,
also
I don't
doesn't-
think there was ever a real financial threat.
To get into a actual like legal argument, it doesn't dilute the marketplace for Batman figures to have a Darkwing figure like sold on like some weird website that's selling them for a limited edition. Like, oh, you guys can get a Darkwing figure versus like the Batman stuff that's in stores. Like,
So in the same way that like Shakespeare is able to take like fucking so many myths from other like spots, he's able to use like fucking Danish myths and turn them into like his own forms. I think Kirkman is able to borrow all of these things that really took years to develop and often kind of sucked and just takes and says, I'm going to cut all the fat off and use only the bits of this that are great. And also because my audience is familiar with the symbols, they can work as a shorthand, right? You got Darkwing, and it's like, because he's writing to an audience that grew up around Batman, you just know that that's supposed to be Batman or Nightwing, right? Omni-Man, he's a Superman clone, right? Like, so then he is able to both subvert and use that symbol at the same time. It's really, it's really fucking bold, right?
I also think like if you wanted to, if somebody was like, the world of comics is disgusting and giant. Well, I don't know what a multiverse is. I don't know what any of these things are. That you could just give them this, and it would explain that sufficiently. Like
And it
it's
would also
accessible. You
explain
don't
it.
need.
Well, you wouldn't have to explain it because you don't need to explain it.
Yeah,
That's
that's
'cause
my
it's
best. My
written,
best point
right?
about
Right.
it is like you could just give somebody this and be like, if you want to understand the world of superheroes and jump off into the medium, this will give you everything you need to know, right?
Yeah, it's like dual purpose.
Invincible
it's
may
good for
be one of the best starting comic books of all time.
Yeah.
Like if your friends like I want to get into comic books, like showing them Invincible and being like this kind of has like a slice of everything is like such a good way to do it. I
Yeah.
feel like that's what I
Like,
did when I was.
Oh, same here. It was one of my
Yeah.
like compare this to like Cosmic Ghost Rider, right? Where like you have to explain like, well, this is after the actual Infinity War. This is like a separate timeline.
Right, you so much. That's why half that comic was just like exposition.
Yeah,
And then there's also
you-
stuff they didn't explain, like
Right.
Galactus's gun. I don't know where that came
And
from.
I'll go to bat for stupid comic book continuity because
Oh, yeah.
I truly enjoy. There's some stories that like only work because they're dredging up like super old continuity that no one cared about and then making like really interesting stuff out of it and using it as sort of like what I love about that is to simp for the Sonic comic. The reason why the later runs of the Sonic comic are so good is they use like the terrible early parts of the run as like this sort of long forgotten past that they can reference back to, sort of like ancient tomes where they're like, no, this is like essentially like starting points. Like you haven't read it, it doesn't matter that you've read it, like, but we'll explain it sort of like, no, this is like this incredible moment that happened in these characters' past. Then you read it and it's terrible. But like it is interesting to have that ability to do that when you have a long enough running series. But the problem is that once you get like bogged down in that, where it's like it becomes like a liability and like a limitation on like what you can do, that's when it really starts to like inhibit your ability to tell good stories.
Yeah, and another contemporary example is the Spider-Verse films, right? They take advantage of the fact that there are 50 years of comic book history to create new and interesting stories.
Yeah.
Those were good movies.
They're really fun
Yeah.
too.
Great.
Where are we in the structure? We've done our introductions.
Yeah, we've talked and we just explained a little bit about the comic. I don't know. This is one thing that maybe the viewers, you fellas and gals,
You lady.
and whoever, my fiance, might have some insight.
She's our only female viewer, I guarantee it.
Should we explain?
No, my girlfriend watches this too.
Oh, hell yeah, that's
I'm
two.
trans. So
Congratulations.
you watch it?
Do you watch
Okay.
it?
I will watch it.
I swear I'll get around to it someday.
So, should we? I guess like I'm curious how much of the actual comic or the content of the comics we should really go through.
I want to talk about something briefly. Is that I really enjoy. So like we talked about this a little bit before the show, but I feel like the amount of comic book movies and media that is available nowadays has kind of burned me out on superhero comics. So the superhero parts of Invincible, they don't catch my attention as much as the Mark moments.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care for the fights with Invincible as much as I do the moments with Mark.
So what's interesting is like I really do love the superhero parts of Invincible, and I think that's like one of those things where it just kind of is like it has the emotional moments and the actual substance that like will scratch that part of your brain, but I think they do the superhero parts well. I think it's just like if you're burnt out and you hate superheroes, you're like, this sucks. And so I think it's one of those things where this is a good litmus test. If you're like, do I hate the superhero shit in Invincible? Yes. Then I probably just hate superhero shit.
It's not like I hate it. I just, so like I watched the series first, viewer. So this was my first reading of Invincible. And there were a lot of things that are different between the two. Like the series fleshes out, and they add some different fight scenes. They flesh out the cheating scene between Rexplode and Duplicate a little bit more.
Also,
And I
great
think-
names on everybody.
Yeah, the names are
awesome.
excellent. And I think that
Also, if I was going to cheat on my girlfriend, it definitely would be with someone who could make 3 or 4 of themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
But would
that,
you do it at your shared place of residence?
He didn't think that
work.
one through.
Yeah.
It was
I wouldn't do it at all because
I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like
yeah.
Rex's deal,
Obviously.
though, is that he doesn't think things through. He's impulsive.
Yeah.
In the character moments outside of the costume are what I enjoy, especially like with Rex.
That's how it should be. It should always be that way, I think. If it's not that way, if you're like, man, all this dialogue is terrible, I want to see them punch stuff. I'm like, this isn't.
That is-
Fight
well-
scenes are cool because of characters.
It's like a TikTok
not the other way around.
thing.
Usually.
But I will say what's interesting about Invincible is that like it is equally as TikTokable as like Cosmic Ghost Rider, because there's
Fans
stuff
can
where
write
it's
a
like
story.
how strong is Thrag, and you're like,
Yeah.
damn, Thrag's really really strong, and you're like, oh, Conquest is strong, but like how strong is like how powerful is that gun that like shoots infinitely, and you can kind of like think about the stupid things that are like, you know, like dumb, but like they're fun to like
They're
just kind
good
of
set pieces.
percolate on.
You have Alan the alien who acts as like a moving ruler
Alan is the
throughout
best.
series
Yeah.
to be like, oh, he's as strong as Invincible now. Now Alan get real strong, but now Invincible real strong
yeah,
too.
catches up to him, and now it's. But yeah, so
Oh yeah, no, so yeah, I agree. I think that like the first issues, it's really cool just seeing like it feels like I'm reading like I didn't really read original Spider-Man.
I said
but
that same thing to John Bon Jovi earlier today.
But I imagine this is kind of what it feels like.
He
right?
remembers.
Like this guy who creates his own costume that's like
Yeah.
a young kid who's, you know, full of idealism, just like trying to, you know, help out. And obviously, you know, it's a superhero story. This isn't, you know, this isn't a spot where you're like, one thing that I love about Robert Kirkman is like, at the beginning, it's like, where are all these supervillains coming from? You know, and later in the comic, they do good, you know, he does try and solve like more complex issues, like he deals with climate change and stuff. But like I think that I agree that I don't know. I think that this comic is a great example of both because like the emotional heart is what you care about, right? Like I care about Mark.
Knock on we should.
I care about. I mean, I care about Adam Eve. I care about Omni-Man. I care about the characters, right? But at the same time, it's pretty cool. Like my favorite scene that really encapsulates both of those aspects is the Immortal versus Omni-Man fight when Omni-Man chops
favorite
Immortal.
line? Is your favorite line?
Maybe not my favorite line. Probably it's my favorite image.
Favorite panel?
When my favorite panel, actually, my favorite panel is I have two for this week, but this is one of them. Is when Immortal chops. Or Omni-Man chops Immortal in half, and then Mark comes flying up, and he's covered in blood, and he's like, "I think we need to talk, son," because it's like a great example of like a cool fight scene, and then also it's like getting to the heart of the emotional issue, which is like the conflict between Mark and his dad.
I think also what's kind of cool is like when you talk about like Spider-Man, what's cool about Invincible is that it's a Spider-Man that like they let take its natural course. Whereas like what's interesting about current Spider-Man is it's like cosmically really tragic that they keep just resetting him emotionally and like life-wise. So he's just perpetually just this guy who's down on his luck and he can never like move past that. And you're kind of like, oh, he's just constantly having a shitty life. And it's like he kind of needs to because, you know, he's bigger than just a guy's like imagination coming up with like a character. But like what's cool about Invincible is that he's like he can grow past those things and become a better person. I also think that like it's an apt metaphor too because you're like whenever you see like Tyrannosaurus or like any of these like new like villains that come in, it's sort of like, who's this Punisher guy? He's hunting after Spider-Man, and then you get to see them like grow and become different people. Where it's like you see like Rexplode, like you see like the Fantastic Four teaming up with Spider-Man. You're like, oh, they're doing their own things too, and they're like developing in their own way. And seeing like the world moving on while Invincible, like even though Invincible is like the main character, seeing the world also like spin as he's like doing his own thing and like people develop is really cool. Like seeing like Adam Eve's story is super cool.
It's unburdened by the things
What has become before.
I keep honestly, it's weird. That keeps running through my head, but in a real way, it's like it is unburdened by the things that like other comic books have to deal with, right? Like the Fantastic Four always has to be the Fantastic Four. Spider-Man always has to be Spider-Man. Mark is a new character, right? This is a new universe. The form that he takes and the changes that he has, like he doesn't have a baseline that he needs to return to for the sake of the universe. you know?
I have a question. At the comic book signing of the dog comic,
Science.
Science.
so two things. I loved how the comic book writer was like, I just reuse panels.
And then
there were
is
like
that in
20
this one?
panels.
Which
Yeah.
issue
Yeah,
is that?
Yeah.
That's like issue 9, I think.
He's like, don't you think that's kind of lazy?
Yeah,
Not really.
nope.
No, yeah, there's 3 of Mark the same way. It's like, don't you think that's
Yeah.
lazy?
It happens a lot in this comic too.
It does.
I
Yeah,
so
like
hard
Mark's
not
asleep.
noticed now.
Yeah.
Mark, he has 3 pages of Mark sleeping
Yeah.
with the exact same art.
The other thing is that Robert Kirkman, is that drawn as Robert Kirk, the guy.
I think it's drawn. So I met Ryan Otley. If you guys could see, I don't know if I have it here. I have an issued Ryan Otley Invincible poster who took over after.
It's Omni-Man like crushing a guy between his asshole. And
No,
like,
he's
and you're like, can you sign this for me?
it's actually more graphic than that. But no, I think Ryan Otley. I remember was a little. It was. I think Ryan Otley was the. It was based on Ryan Otley.
Yeah.
I'm the artist.
Well, because I remember they did like a Robert Kirkman pastiche in the show because he was like more of like a showrunner. And when they were talking about like, oh, I love the animation and stuff, that's really cool. They talked about, they have the same thing that happens, but like they talk about the animation as opposed to like the actual comics. And so they do a pastiche of him, but voiced by, I Think You Should Leave guy, Tim Robinson.
Oh, that's fun.
But the funny thing about like looking at like the show versus this too is like apparently like because at the very end of the first episode all of the Guardians of the Globe die and that's like the hook for the show.
Yeah.
And apparently in this one he was like, no, in issue 25 there's going to be this crazy twist, and it was selling like shit, and they're like, you're not going to get to issue 25, just do the twist now. And then eventually, and so that's why he introduced the Guardians of the Globe like the same issue basically that they got killed off. So
Which is funny, is it's one of my favorite things.
well, it's what like made it something that he could actually like. Because beforehand, it was like we're not making it to issue 10, and then like after that, they're like, you're gonna be fine.
It's a
Like,
good hook.
it's a-
Every story needs that hook to get people invested at the beginning, and without the Guardians of the Globe,
Yeah.
without the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Globe, whatever, the Globetrotters,
the Globetrotters,
without the
Harlem
Globe,
Globetrotters.
yeah, without
And
the
then-
Harlem Globetrotters being blown up by Omni-Man,
the
would
Washington General
not, it wouldn't
Omni
have been as
Man.
good.
I maybe I will be the dissent. I would have been fine if they had taken a little bit longer. One of my favorite
well,
things.
then I don't
is,
think
like,
we would have Invincible. Truth be told,
For sure. I'm glad, but I like the meandering pace. I kind of like that it's just like a kid. It has like a very Salad Days type feel that I appreciate in the early issues, where it's just like
I agree.
kid running around.
I agree. And Robert Kirkman, if you're listening, I think you did everything right. And the only
Yeah.
issues with this are the ones that were imposed upon you. So
Yeah.
Also, what happened?
There's definitely
there are
a big
some
issue
issues.
later.
yeah.
Oh,
later on. I'm
But,
I'm talking
Also,
early days.
what happened, Robert? When you were writing this and The Walking Dead, did you just decide? Did you just put all of your effort into this?
Yeah, we know it couldn't have been ChatGPT writing The Walking
Right?
Dead.
Well,
It didn't
okay, so
exist
what
back
I'm
then.
convinced of is that when
And it's
you
not that
write,
good.
this is him writing and just barfing his love for superhero comics onto the page. The Walking Dead is him specifically trying to emulate a certain style and trying to be like, no, this is my gritty realism thing. So everything has to be filtered through that. Like, it can't just be like writing whatever comes out of his pen. It's like very rigidly, it has to be what if zombies, but like serious, and we were the real monsters. And as opposed to this is like, what if whatever I wanted, and it's more
right.
growing up around the superhero world.
I also wonder sometimes, because I talked about this in The Walking Dead as a criticism, that like some of his worldviews or influences of his beliefs may be coming through with the way he writes the female characters. I think it's a good thing in the 12 comics that we read today, just about Mark's slow disillusionment with his father that ends up with him being harmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His dad is the piece of shit, and his mom is kind of like.
And
I don't
it's-
know that the women are super well written though. In like his mom is.
She's fun. I mean, they're
Well,
not.
I'm not trying to say anything about the women that are written in Invincible right now. I'm trying to say that I wonder if like something Robert Kirkman went through with the disillusionment of his father is what influenced the creation of the Omni-Man character, and then growing to better understand that
It's
his
the-
dad isn't the person that he thought he was, but he still is a person who's growing and learning.
I'll play the role of Connor here and say like, there's no way to know.
Yeah, I know that there's no way to know, but it's if it's not something that Kirkman wrote from a personal perspective, it's something that resonated with me on a personal level, and that's why it's meaningful.
Criticism, like destruction, is a creative act,
Yeah.
as we all know.
I also really like how you have like sort of like the humanity where the dad's like, no, you're like me, and then like Mark just innately is like, he never even like once is like, maybe I'm a Viltrumite. Maybe I.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm
That
human.
place I've never heard of. you
Yeah,
know,
it's like there, but there's like this inclination for him to be like, no, I have all of the traits of a Viltrumite. So like, you would think that he would be like, maybe I am more like my dad than I am like the people, but like, not even once does. And that's the whole idea of like people say like, because Mark gets the shit beat out of him all the time, and like the only thing that's invincible is like his spirit, where it's like he goes through the entire thing and like
his spirit is the Walking Dead.
yeah, and they were the friends they made along the way. It's something where he is able to like stick up for what is right, even when he's going to die for it. And he's like, you know what, it doesn't matter. Like, I will protect this world. And like, even if he's like gets lost occasionally and like is trying to figure out stuff, he still has like a good heart, and like his heart's the thing
Principled.
that's invincible.
My
He's in principle.
He's in principle.
my favorite panel.
He is in the principal's office.
Wyatt, you said your favorite panel was
It's either the one where he's talking to the author,
Yeah.
or
you think it's lazy? No.
yeah, or the Omni-Man chop, or then the end when he's like,
You only get one.
when he says "I love you" to it, when he's like talking about, and then Omni-Man flies into space.
He's crying.
Yeah,
Are we doing favorite panel?
My favorite panel is after Omni-Man returns from his
Flaxen invasion.
Flaxen invasion, and it's just Mark and his mom being like, "Hey, Dad back yet?" And then the panel is largely the mom,
No, that was gonna be my favorite panel. Damn it.
and then you can still be your favorite panel, and then you can see it's a 3x3, and in the middle panel, Omni-Man is coming back, and you see his suit. You just see his like arm and profile,
and his beard.
and his beard, and he only says, "I need to shave," and like. But the focus of the panels on the next three is when you see his mom crying.
And what I love about Debbie too is she's talking about like when Mark's like he got pulled into like a different dimension or whatever. She's like, "Oh, cool. I guess that's more pork chops for us." Like she is unbothered by it because she wants her son to be unbothered by it. But like deep down, it's sort of like I don't know. Like if you know anybody who like has like a person who like is like a service worker or something, where it's like they go out and like fight fires, and they're like, "Well, I don't know if they're gonna come back," and it's like they kind of just have to like detach themselves from that somewhat, but like deep down they are like deeply worried every time they leave.
I like
How old
Debbie
was
in this.
Kirkman when he wrote this?
He was 11.
Yeah, 11. He was a prodigy. He was sort of a Beethoven of
It
comic.
shows.
It explains The Walking Dead a little bit better.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The sex stuff between like these grown adults. Who,
It's so strange.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, it's like, oh, Mark's gone. Let's fuck
fuck.
6 or 7 times.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, oh, the shirt's on backwards. Oh, we gotcha.
I absolutely agree. It's like, do you know what it's like to be in like a 15-year long relationship?
It's like a 15-year-old is writing. it.
yeah,
No,
right.
like-
If I can
Like,
play
I bet
Jack,
these guys just fuck when we're
if
out.
I can play Jack and Connor for a minute, it's impossible to know.
Actually, it's not. We know when he was born.
We're not talking about when he was born.
He was. He said,
Yeah.
"I wonder when he was born."
We're
so-
talking, well, Jack's it. Never mind.
if I'm still
Leave it up to me and Connor.
If
Don't
I-
try and fill my shoes. You don't have enough hatred.
if I'm steel
You're too
manning,
happy.
if I'm steel manning Kirkman, I think what he's trying to show there is more like
Happy family.
not even happy family. I think he's also trying to like
happy wife,
Happy
happy
He's
wife.
trying to like
Yeah.
round
Because
them
it's
out.
not a happy family.
Yeah, I
as
think
it turns out.
I think the point he's trying to make is more about Omni-Man. Like the
25, by the way, when he wrote this.
Oh, cool. Well, he's really good. Better.
How many
than-
girlfriends had he had at that?
0.
Okay.
It's impossible to know.
Now, allegedly, he was he was living with the artist of Invincible and his wife at the time, his newly married wife at the time that he wrote Invincible. So the artist was just like couch surfing because he couldn't.
Yeah,
That's fun.
I just I'm very skeptical of the sex scenes.
It was
feels,
silly.
It's silly. It also feels like the way he's like, oh, we're going. The way she's like, oh, we're going again. Like,
Yeah.
It feels like, well, you have a say in this. You
Right.
know,
Yeah,
like, do you want to go again?
Yeah.
It's
It was awkward.
it was
mean, that's just
supposed to
like-
be like they're having like like their relationship is like so good, and then you see
Yeah.
it's like
That's how they're
you
playing it. Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, if you really want to like dig into it, and it's like maybe it doesn't need this much examination, but it's the idea that Omni-Man is like a very like the appeal of Omni-Man is that he can fly you to Paris for a dinner like that night, and it's one of those things where it's like he has this like magical element of
It's a
him,
seducing power.
Yeah, he has this like, oh man, he's gonna have
Like
he's gonna-
Dracula.
He's gonna bust like 6 or 7 times and be like
know,
down
but
for one more time.
Person gets tired.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Not him.
not
I
on
mean,
the
like, we're probably not going to find realistic depictions of sexual relationships in comic books.
not the ones you're reading.
All right.
Not any of the ones we've read,
I'm reading them on a site with numbers.
except for maybe Saga.
how
That
much
one was pretty
manga
good.
have you
Oh,
read?
Saga.
Does that count?
That's
reading
how many
a-
doujinshi have you read?
I've only Good Night Pun Pun.
It was silly. I think it was just like trying to be like, oh,
It was one of my few complaints.
rascals. Yeah, it was awkward. I'm just glad that the thing is, if you got 12 issues and you can be like, he might have missed the mark on like 5 panels. You're like, all right,
Oh, yeah.
That's a
I'm-
great batting average.
He doesn't have a strong woman feel.
I mean,
like
yeah.
He's also
full-grown
25 when
woman.
he's writing all
I
of
agree.
these. Like,
But that being said, I liked, I felt like Debbie was, she's not like, she's not a star character, but Mom seemed like a fight. She's a character
Yeah,
that I
no,
appreciated.
she was-
Debbie's
she
good.
didn't read as hollow or fake to me as
Yeah.
all of his other female
Yeah, yeah.
characters.
Adam
in Walking
Eve is
Dead.
cool.
Adam
Yeah,
Eve
Adam
seems
Eve's-
like a realistic, normal character.
and again,
for the
I
most
like
part.
that Adam Eve progresses like throughout the story, and she's like, I'm basically a god. Like, let's just try to examine like what I can do to actually help people.
Yeah.
I love
didn't
her
like
art.
how she was essentially looked exactly the same as Mark's girlfriend. So there was Adam Eve.
And then
was-
there's
Oh,
Amber.
they changed
Amber.
that. They changed that in the show for the
Yeah,
better.
she's instead everyone just got to be racist in the show because she sucks in the comic too. But in the show, they made her black, so then people were like, "That's why she sucks."
No, but she's in the show. She's totally right.
well, no. In the
Yeah.
show, a lot of people are. Well,
I liked her in
big
the show.
problem in the show is that she's like, I will go for I will defend Amber haters for a little bit. In the show, she's like, I knew you were invincible, but I still got mad at you that you like saved me and on
Yeah,
all of those.
that is
scenarios.
frustrating.
Where it was like she basically got to go in and like she knew that Mark was the person who was like saving her life in all of these different scenarios, but she still blew up at him
Yeah.
because she's like, "You suck, you're terrible, you weren't there on our date," and it's like, yeah, maybe you can say that if you're completely clueless, but if you know that that's Mark beating up that giant robot over there,
Maybe he's got some other shit going on.
you have to sit down and be like, okay, I guess this doesn't work between us because we have different schedules and you have to deal with those
Yeah,
things. But you
yeah.
can't be mad at him.
She's 20 years. She's not even 20 when they break up.
But in the
Right.
comics, they just handle it better.
So
Yeah.
does Amber look like the Adam girl,
No,
or is it
she looks completely
is it
different.
just
in
me?
the show she's
guys?
in this,
White guys look just the same. To
I
me.
don't think they look that similar.
All white women
in
look the
this
same.
either.
all
John
women
Bon
are
Jovi.
ugly.
Though I do think that like
What?
they handle that better in the comic because Amber blows up on Mark and then is like, that was unfair, right?
Yeah.
And then they just have like kind of an unfulfilling relationship for both sides until they're both like, well,
This
we
doesn't
should
In the
probably
comic?
break up.
Fairly common thing.
Yeah.
This is in the comic.
That's in the comic.
later.
yeah,
it happens.
later.
Yeah, next-
And there's a sense of like, all right, like Amber is supposed to be like this person who is the normal person and he's trying to date a normal person while being a superhero. And that's supposed to be like the like counterbalance where you're like, that's interesting. Like, how would you deal with that? Like the constant, like you would have to flake, you would have to do all this stuff. But like when you look at Amber in like the show, she's like competent enough and smart enough that she's like, I know everything that's going on. I understand. And like it's one of those things too where there's that part where she's like, why don't you ever volunteer at the soup kitchen? And like when she knows that he's invincible, he's like, I'm
literally-
doing real change.
His
but-
whole job is volunteering.
well,
He's
like,
like-
his whole job is like saving the world, and she's like, "I'm doing real change by volunteering at the soup kitchen right now. Like this is important work." And it's like, okay,
I don't
like,
get paid to be invincible.
and
It's
so
like,
it's this like righteous, like it's just this like self righteousness that she has in the show, where you're like, I know that you're trying to say something that you were like Mark's, like the heroics that he does, like there's still heroics that you can do in the real world, but it comes off as like so annoying that you're like, shut up, like
kind of
shut the
big league
fuck
a
up.
guy that
Right.
risks his life every day.
I
Yeah.
think that like in that's a critique that works much better in like media that isn't super because like in like regular media it's like yeah it is you regular people that make the wheels of change, right?
When you see
Like,
Mark after the conquest fight, and you're like, you're not really sacrificing anything.
yeah,
It's
but
like
in this comic, it's like, well, if Mark isn't patrolling, Dr. Seismic is probably going to like blow up the eastern seaboard, right?
Yeah,
it's
we
like
need him out there.
It's like it's just silly, right? Like
Yeah.
he's like in his time off, which is already like very slim. He's going to go to a soup kitchen when if he had the time and energy, he would just patrol, right? Like,
also like he could do so much more than just a soup kitchen if he like really put his powers to it.
How
but
much
the best,
soup could he serve an hour?
yeah,
Dude,
way more than Amber. But
mean,
it's one of those things where you have a
he could go plow a field or something, right?
Yeah.
super field.
in
that would know, like his dad.
Yeah,
well, and that's what what's it called? That's what Adam Eve does eventually. She's like, I can not fight people because like other people have the fight people stuff, but like my powers are uniquely suited to like generating and like revitalizing all of Africa, and it's like, oh, that's
Yeah, she can like shift matter.
yeah.
right?
She's like Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, I don't. That's the one thing about her that irritates me is like, why does she never just turn the air in people's lungs into ice crystals and kill them immediately?
She like
She's a
has
power-
limits on her
power
power.
I know
clamp.
she has limits on her power, but I thought that was like in terms of herself.
No,
I think
that-
she can't do it to humans.
Yeah,
That's
there's
her-
something.
to
There's a
humans.
reason that like I mean, we'll read it. We'll figure it out.
I have a
doesn't have
question.
limits.
Why? So I hate to bring sex up again. Why?
You're a fucking '80s rock star. I get it.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
That's exactly why, and that's
Yeah, smoke on the
what
water.
I have
right?
to do. Yep.
No.
That's what that was about.
Why?
Wanted dead or alive.
Oh yeah, that one too.
I am wanted to ask this question. Everyone has panties on. Did you notice? Like all of the girls, like Adam Eve, she had like panties. Like I feel like Robert Kirkman probably sits around and draws naked women, just like, hey, look at this. She's got big tits and panties on.
well,
Maybe he didn't draw it.
first of all, he didn't draw it. I will. I
I redact what I said.
I assume
Kirkman,
he probably
and
gave
replace it with whoever drew it.
yeah. I mean, I do think it's a fair critique to say like.
It's very comic booky to have like
Yeah.
giant boobs and
just
Like men
like-
all wear like complete coverage suits.
I think he basically just takes all of the comic book tropes that exist and he axes like a lot of them that suck, but he
What
holds
does he
on to
axe
that
them?
one. He does what?
What does he axe them?
He holds on to that one for whatever reason, and I think it's because it's very iconic. But I
does
think
wear
it's,
a mini.
we
Would
should
it really
have-
be so hard to give Adam Eve pants?
we should have a moment.
That's a good point.
in all
Yeah.
of our. We should have
or a skort
Or just give
pants.
her pants?
Yeah.
waves.
Women
feminine-
wear pants.
or a denim skirt.
Well, it's like
be great.
not a
I
farmer.
love that.
also like I don't know. It is kind of interesting because Adam Eve is like sort of like a child hero, so she's kind of dressed like weird
Yeah,
child
uh-huh,
pageant
cool.
like kids, in my opinion.
Yeah.
and that's kind of it's in my like I don't know.
Brought
There
to you
are
by
way
the
worse
Mormons.
superhero. There, she did not go into the dissolving clothes river. There are way worse superhero women's costumes.
All right.
like I don't
You're-
think anyone sees that.
We
and they're
should
like,
we should probably explain that reference to the viewers.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
I want them to feel uncomfortable.
Okay. So I want to talk about my favorite. Are we doing line or panel?
Well, first of all, maybe explain the dissolving clothes river.
no.
So there's a river in
no,
Gotham.
No.
yeah, there's a river in Gotham.
All right.
that
So we
dissolves.
read the comic book series. There are 3 Batman comics titled Red Mist, right?
They're
Yeah.
Batman vampire, right?
Yeah,
That's-
vampire. Batman is a vampire. We read the second one, and there's a scene where Sabrina Kyle, she falls into a river.
Selena Kyle.
Yeah, Sabrina, the teenage witch.
Yeah, the
She
teenage
falls
Catwoman.
into a river in Gotham, fully clothed.
In
and she was
werewolf
attacked
form.
by she was attacked by a werewolf
Oh,
first.
thank you.
And then when she climbs out of the river, all of her clothing had just disappeared.
which was awesome.
Which is where the joke comes from is
the-
the clothes dissolved in the river.
The dissolving clothes river.
But I wanted to talk about one of my favorite panels, and it occurs very early in the sections that we read, and it's the scene where Mark comes down. He goes, "I flew today,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "That's great.
That was a good one.
Could you pass the potatoes?"
yeah.
And it really taps into that feeling of when you're young and you feel like you've accomplished something, and you don't realize how much
Yeah.
more there is to do.
And but it's also like, yeah, it's interesting because you kind of get to see like Omni-Man raising this kid. Like,
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
I know. No, let's play the
Cut
let's
that.
play
Cut
the
that.
Instagram.
Cut that. Cut that.
No,
cut
let's
that
see
out
what
of here.
Badongo Crocodilo has to say.
Bombardillo.
Dio Crocodillo.
That is
Assassina
that is
Cappuccina.
insightful, Trip.
Tra-la-lila, tra-la-la.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just like it stood out to me as like, oh, when I was in 6th grade, I'm like, Mom, Dad, I did my homework. They're like, that's great.
Pass
We're
the
gonna
potato.
have dinner now. Sit down and eat your vegetables. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't get a reward.
But like to you,
I just did division, long division.
It gives me like Mob Psycho vibes, where like
Yeah, it does.
you've got this guy who's got incomprehensible powers, but like the vibe of the story is so slice of life.
it's like it doesn't. That's not the part that matters. The part that matters is like what
His
like
journey.
yeah, like Mark is feeling at all moments and being like internally how is Mark like processing what's going on around him. It's not about like how hard he can punch.
It's a very true to form coming of age story. It captures the feeling of growth and
Mark Psycho.
changing perspective and like you had mentioned earlier, Jack, they don't really have static characters. All the characters are evolving and
Yeah.
growing together, different directions.
That is a
Absolutely.
good. My favorite, since we did my favorite line is. Also, maybe we should combine favorite line, favorite panel.
Yeah.
Maybe
What can I do favorite panel then too? 'Cause
I was thinking about for
favorite.
context.
Should we do image? Favorite image?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
feel like
probably
favorite
yeah,
line
that's
and
probably a better. That's a good change.
comics
Favorite
as a
image.
medium are both their lines and their panels. So
Oh,
therefore
I did.
we should.
I got this on Audible.
podcast.
Yeah.
They read
Marty-
out all and Invincible
punches.
Mark dressed as Invincible gets his face crushed in repeatedly by his father dressed as Omni-Man.
It makes sense. I didn't know who his girlfriend looked like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
You just
She
assumed
she looks a lot like John Bon Jovi actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
very attractive.
that was a weird part where you're like, is that? And he's like, here's my girlfriend Amber, and you're like, okay.
And you're like,
All the same. All of the names will change.
Mark starts to head upstairs and Debbie's like, she's gonna shoot him through the heart. I know it.
He'll be to blame, Nolan.
My favorite panel was when Aquaman stand-in who had a giant fish head. Was everybody's busy, and then he gets a call, and he's like, "Finally, some action!"
Yeah.
I was like, "All right, that's sweet."
Yeah, it's I like the Guardians of the Globe. Just like I know that like they don't stay around for very long, and the whole point is just like they're a pastiche. But like I do kind of like how they're a little bit different. Also,
Yeah, they're fun.
in the show, the way that like Nolan actually like goes about fighting them, like seeing like what a Superman would be like against all of the rest of the Justice League is so cool. Like the part where he's holding up the Flash and the Flash is trying to punch him super fast, but he's like just crushing his head. And the part where it's like you basically have to get a guy who's like, how do they try to beat Superman? It's like they can't. Like Superman is like kind of the glue, and so it's just
If you ask Zack Snyder what that'd be like.
But Omni-Man could beat Superman.
no, because he fights dirty. I remember Homelander. There's like a Homelander versus Superman thing, and they're like, "Why would Homelander?" Like the boys' directors were like, "Homelander would win every time because he goes for the groin. He fights dirty." And it's like, all right, then
We
you
don't
don't
need
understand Superman.
Yeah.
Then you shouldn't be writing a pastiche of Superman because you clearly don't understand what makes him work as a character.
My favorite line is from the Guardians of the Globe issue when Invincible is fighting that silly villain, and he says, "I thought I was rid of all you ridiculous villains." And the guy replies, "You may think of Biplane as a silly villain now, Immortal, but soon you'll see the damage I can do."
And then he was in space later.
Yeah, like just like the whole idea that like there's this villain here who's like, "I'm Biplane." And-
that was I loved Biplane.
yeah.
All right, I have a serious thing to talk about.
Is it gonna be about women's underwear?
It's a little less serious than that. One thing that I thought about while reading this, comparing it to The Walking Dead, was the idea of power. So Mark's dad represents, to me anyway, the power structure of at least for the first 12 series. You know, he's a guy. He's like the cop.
Yeah.
And then when I compare that to the main cop in The Walking Dead, who, you know, he's an uncorruptible force in The Walking Dead, which is silly, but he is very corrupted in Invincible. And it's interesting to me that you could write two different stories.
Diametrically opposed ideas of power.
One being accurate, one being absurd.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. I mean, that's a really good point. The fact that everybody's like, the guy with the gun, we got to follow him. He's right. But in this, in a much more like grand scope, where having power would be way more, like instead of being a guy with a gun, you're a you're a fucking human gun.
You are a gun.
You
right.
are a
also
gun.
a human gun that can like save lives. Like you can actually, because there's something about like the power in The Walking Dead which is useful, but like the most important thing is like the stability and like making like people not be like scared. Like obviously like, being able to like fend off people, but anyone can like shoot a zombie, but like being able to like be a leader and be competent, that's what's more important. And like they focus more on the power, whereas in this one, like being powerful is objectively incredibly useful in this world, where it's like it's important to have that. But like what I find interesting, like you said, is like the power of like Omni-Man is almost like
It's not
that's-
laudable. It's not a good thing that we should respect and admire.
or it doesn't make him right. Like you
Yeah.
eventually see Mark gets powerful, but it's one of those things where like what makes Mark right is innate in him before he gets that power, and so it doesn't have a might makes right thing as much as The Walking Dead does.
And even then, the idea that there's a super strong character who like, it's like what you would. It's like I would, having read this. If I read this first, I would then look at Rick and say like, all right, when is the rug going to be pulled, and we're going to find out that Rick is a villain,
Right.
Yeah,
That's what should have happened.
That's what you would want to happen, right?
Yeah.
Because that's like all right, I get it. The guy that seems
It
like
makes
he's
sense.
super good and has super the most powers in the world is like can't be that. It's not a real thing. But Rick is this like weird shitty boy. He's a human Boy Scout, which is just sucks to read.
right. He's
And
a pedo or something.
Right. You just wait to get him. The whole Walking Dead is just watching this guy get the goodness kicked out of him, which is
Yeah.
no fun.
Which rocks.
dog
You know?
walking, elephant walking, everybody.
As opposed to Mark, which is a guy, like instead of watching Rick, become progressively more morally gray, which I don't think always happens, you get this honest portrayal of what happens if like somebody of the power, the staying power of the human spirit, Like if Mark slowly just over time was like, I guess I was wrong about being good,
And just
I would
like-
be like, what?
And what's
The
interesting,
concept of post-traumatic growth exists as well. Like surviving traumatic experiences can spur people on to
Yeah.
growth,
yeah,
which happens a lot in this series.
which is
Because
what we
Mark,
should strive to do with children.
Mark almost dies many times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
One time he punches his arm until it curls up like a little spring.
that's
Which
such.
also
And then he
happens
uses his head.
in The Walking Dead.
Well, he just
Rick-
breaks his hand.
Yeah, but in terms of the shape of those events, almost the exact
on a
same.
much
Yeah,
less
almost-
on a much
well-
less serious note, but equally as serious deep down in my heart. I don't like when guys' teeth goes everywhere when they get punched. That makes me feel really uncomfortable.
It makes me laugh.
It makes me feel very uncomfortable when they have the teeth go everywhere and they have like a bunch of teeth going. I'm like, I don't like that.
I love it.
I've always wanted to watch a movie where somebody punches a guy and he spits one tooth out, and he spits another tooth out, and
then he
just keeps spitting teeth
that
out.
would be sweet.
And then he throws up because he has a concussion.
Yeah.
And then he just sits down and is like, you win.
Stop, please.
Please.
And then the camera's
That
just
hurts
on him.
so bad.
I can
On
no
him
longer
for the next
count
24
to 10.
hours because he's not allowed to sleep. They're like, don't fall asleep.
Yeah, the guy who's like been beating him up, like Mark, is like, all right, we're gonna have to like elevate your legs.
Yeah. Like, are you okay? I don't want to go to jail or anything.
Yeah.
He's got a brain bleed. Cut him open.
So I guess is the next thing just saying overall what we thought.
No, I got to do my favorite panel.
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought your favorite panel was the comic one.
Panties.
The
Oh, yeah.
panels too. Yeah.
No,
But what's your other favorite?
Sorry,
panel?
what?
Your favorite one.
So I have two favorite panels
Sure.
and no favorite lines. I liked the when they were playing catch.
Yeah, that was
The idea
Yeah.
that you could, because really, if you threw something, I mean,
It would reach escape velocity if you threw it.
it would. Yeah, if you
wouldn't,
threw it
like-
that hard, it should. Right, but I mean,
It's cool. It's
cool,
like got
right?
an awesome like
yeah, the idea that you could throw something, and if there were no gravity or
or like if there is gravity, but like it's like very deterministic, where it's like
gravity, right.
regardless of how fast you're going, it will always.
it was fun to watch.
Yeah, it's
cool.
a fun scene. It's not
Play
real.
catch.
And
Which is fine, right? Which is not what I want, right? Like I don't read this and think, I don't want to think about, how the Flash's footsteps would destroy the Earth's mantle.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a quote from the guy who was in charge of Valve, Gabe Newell, I think his name is, where they're designing Half-Life 2, and they're like, well, some of the physics aren't realistic. And he goes, well, we talked about it, and like sometimes realistic isn't fun.
Yeah. Right? Like,
well, it's like honestly in most. It's so funny because like in so many mediums, like I know in like animation, that's a principle where it's like if you're like making things like 100% realistic the entire time, it looks like shit because
Yeah.
like that's not what implies motion and like what
Yeah.
your brain imagines as like something that's like fluid or impactful. And like same thing with this where it's like the cool parts are not like, well, technically the ball would reach escape velocity, so
Yeah.
therefore, and also if they were doing that, there would be a sonic boom that would completely destroy the East Coast, all of the windows there. It's like the cool part is like, damn, that's awesome. They're like doing catch, but like they're facing their backs to
Fun
each other,
superhero
and it goes
dad and
all the
son
way around
stuff.
the world. You're like, that's cool.
Yeah, and they're playing catch,
Yeah.
which is like classic Americana.
and
Yeah.
which should be could be a little cloying and lame.
Could be,
you
but
know,
it
but
wasn't.
like it's executed well. The other thing that I like about this is like, if this were The Walking Dead, there would need to be exposition showing that you'd be like, I really feel like we're becoming a lot closer, son.
Yeah.
You know?
And
then
then
a
there'd be a
zombie
scene
would
where
bite.
Mark's talking to the cat. He's like, man, cat, the more I talk about growing up, the sadder it makes me.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But I just see this and I'm like, they don't need to tell me how they're feeling. I can tell based on what they're saying and the fact that the artist is talented.
Are you telling me that they're showing us what's happening?
They're showing us.
Yeah.
Not
and then he
telling us.
swoops back up and catches it when
Before
he's
he
on his way to
leaves,
college.
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot. That's like good writing. It's just fun, good writing.
It's also like really impactful in the sense that like, I don't know, the game of catch is such a traditional thing that you're supposed to do in your adolescence with your dad. So the idea that your last throw like escapes the bounds of like the earth and then like you grab it right before you're going off to college.
Yeah.
It's sort of like putting a bookend on your childhood in like
Yeah.
a really neat way that is.
Well, they weren't in college yet. They were just going on a trip, right?
No, but I do feel like the trip to college is like sort of a rite of passage.
Sure, yeah,
and
it
the
makes
idea,
sense that you're like that's when you're you put the last catch before you go to college.
yeah, and in the same way, like that his superhero powers occur during his senior year, they're sort of like coinciding with him becoming like a full adult. It just feels like such a nice bookend to like, well, I'm not a kid anymore, you know.
Yep.
Well, I like also to the point of like past the potatoes, like the idea of Omni-Man like playing catch with him, doing this kind of like infantilized thing is like he still clearly does not view Mark as like
yeah.
a person who's like worthy of like a Viltrumite
Serious
game.
person,
He's like,
yeah.
even though Mark's like, no, I have all these powers, I'm super cool, and it's like the same thing that you would be thinking in high school. It's like I figured everything out. I have my driver's license. I can go wherever I want. I'm super cool. It's like you do zoom out and you do learn more about the world, and like as much as like Omni-Man is wrong, he is right in the sense that like Mark is like
He doesn't. He's a kid.
he doesn't
Kid.
get it yet, and that's what's so cool is like seeing him early on in this and like see him grow from that.
And
Now
how
that
like
you mentioned that, that's my favorite image from this comic was when Mark just finished fighting Alan the alien and he turns around to look at the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's all
Yeah.
these stars around it, and it really sticks out to me of one of those moments where Mark is like taking a second to realize that things are a little bit bigger than they seem when you're inside them.
really the best and most. I feel like the best from a writing perspective. The things that makes this really special is like all of the things that Mark goes through are just things. There are things that everybody goes through.
Yeah.
they're all. It's like, what is it like to realize the world is much bigger than you? Like what's it like to realize your parents might not be the people you thought they were? What's it like to be?
Hey,
What's it like for your teeth to get crushed out on top
Yeah.
of a mountain?
I know that.
I don't like that.
You're-
I don't like that part. I didn't like that part of growing up when my teeth went everywhere and I got
Yeah.
punched real hard.
See these whale ivory.
I
George
appreciate
Washington teeth.
being able to find like those moments, and then like it's almost like I'm being slipped a roofie. Is like the insofar as just That's a terrible metaphor.
I don't think you've
Yeah.
ever been.
Yeah, that was really bad.
Yeah,
I'm glad you said that.
You're
It is. I am
equating
being-
anything in this comic.
It is. It's subtle enough for me to not realize it's happening. You know, I can just enjoy the effects.
I think
of
everybody
the artifice.
realizes.
He's emotionally pickpocketing you.
Yeah,
kind of. I mean, it's
100%.
also not a great way to phrase it.
Well, he's pulling
And then
emotions
Robert
out,
Kirkman
even though you
says,
don't
like,
realize it.
Robert
Well, yeah,
Kirkman
but-
says, "Hey, buddy, you're looking real bad. Come on back with me. I'll drive you back home."
It's
It-
more
or
like
you're, or
he's-
you're on the train and Robert Kirkman's like, "Boom, sorry, bub," and you're like, "Oh, my wallet."
It's
Yeah.
more like reverse. I don't know. It's like more like
He put something
reverse
in your pocket,
pickpocketing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
reverse
You know?
pickpocket.
Where, like,
which is a bunch of teeth that he just beat off
You're
again.
like, where did all these teeth come from? And
It's-
then the police pull you aside.
and you're like, no, these are mine.
They're like the teeth.
We caught the
bandit.
notorious serial killer, the Tooth Fairy.
And I was like, no, I'm not gay.
They're like, well, we didn't
What?
ask that part, but that's good to know.
Oh, tell me
They're
the
like,
guy
well,
named
that-
the Tooth Fairy's not gay.
no, the last part of that. Was
These
just-
aren't mine.
Anyways,
All right, second scene,
Pocket teeth.
which I said I had 2. I actually have 3.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Are you sure?
Quick!
Are you sure
One
you
is
don't have 4?
upsetting. Should I do the
Let's hear it.
upsetting or
I want to
Yeah,
hear the
go-
upsetting one.
Let's hear it all.
It was upsetting to me that I didn't think to say this last week, but the murder-suicide scene in The Walking Dead is fucking terrible.
What scene is that?
The black guy,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, with his son, yeah.
yeah, with his daughter,
Yeah.
and her like obviously evil boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, who was evil. Like you see him and you're like, oh, he's evil.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
that's a nefarious
And then they're
fella.
like, hey, let's have sex and then kill each other.
Wait, did we
Yep.
read that?
It was further than what we
That was
got.
further down. Yeah, I
Anyway,
know what you're talking
don't
about.
read
but
it.
That's way
Yeah.
further down the
Because
line.
it's dumb. But this is good.
And then they both turn into zombies after that.
Yeah,
don't
and the
they?
dad kills the boyfriend slowly as a zombie form.
And deserved it. When Mark quits Burger Mart
Yeah.
and he throws the
And then do you see
garbage
how
in the air,
later-
and then like 10 episodes later,
Yeah.
it almost hits that guy in the
He's like,
street.
boy, what?
What's so?
Yeah.
Burger Mart.
I don't know if you guys have like read super far into this, but like that becomes
have
such a
not.
reoccurring thing where there's like a religion that starts around that, where it's like because things keep like graduation caps get thrown, like all of this.
There's
stuff gets
so
thrown.
much of that, like the biplane guy who they throw into this. Like,
Yeah.
he's in
Yeah.
space. There's just a lot of good.
And I love
It's the power of like a reference that like you forgot about, where you're like, oh,
Yeah.
Callback.
It's like
Yeah.
when Dracula Flow says like Sabuba, I'm smoking this like Sabuba, and you're like Sabuba always wins. That's the guy in the pod racing thing.
Yeah.
and you're like that's funny, and like, it just
funny.
pages a part of your brain where you're like, I remember that garbage bag.
I was laying bricks for Mansa Musa.
Yeah.
back when you were a tier 1 civilization.
It's just really good craft. It's really good writing craft.
You
right
talking
there.
about Dracula Flow? I totally agree.
Yeah, I agree.
We're smoking filtered crack, you stupid piece of shit.
Yeah.
I deserve this.
Sometimes I'm jealous of Joji. It's like he pivoted from shitty YouTube art to legitimate art in such a great way. And then he'll
everyone
occasionally
else-
and nobody knows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, and everyone else in his like class was like is still like in the mud doing like stupid YouTube
Max
drama.
Mofo
Yeah.
and like iDubbbz
And but like what I love about
H3.
like I remember when I was like one of my friends, he was really into Joji in college, and I was like, "Oh, I think
That's
that's, like
Filthy
I think
Frank."
that's Filthy Frank," and he's like, "Who the fuck is Filthy Frank?"
Frank? Yeah.
And it was I've had that interaction like a couple of times now because he's just like like a hot pop boy who's like he makes like cool like sad boy music, and like people just like him, and it's like, oh, he just is talented. Like
It's also nice to see because when I liked Filthy Frank when I was in high school, but when I watch his videos now, I'm like,
Is that Is that
He's a
vape
similar.
it's
similar vein.
it's a similar
Right.
it's the same cohort
yeah.
basically.
But when I watch Filthy Frank now, I'm like, oh,
Well, and
this is upsetting.
there are moments where you can see that he's growing and like I shouldn't be saying these things. Like
Yeah.
there's a moment when he's on the H3 pod and they say Ethan says something like horribly misogynistic and he's in the background like
Well, it's also like what I love about Joji is he's just like actually like because the big thing too is a lot of those guys what they do is they're like, well, let me try to like parlay this and be like, let's get all of these
Join the alt-right.
really shitty fans or like shitty fans and then like try to get them into my new venture, which is like doing like a boxing thing or like doing like this other thing. And it's like what I love about him is he's like, I get like this was a fun time in my life. I've grown past this. I can't bring any of this over to this. Maybe I like use my connections that I've gotten through YouTube and get a contact with like an agent. And then I produce stuff and then I have to rebuild that audience because I didn't like that audience was built from kind of like doing shitty things. So I don't want to carry them into the next one. And I think that's really admirable because it's like, oh, you actually have talent.
Well, he's like the group of 25-year-olds who go to like, I don't know, like Tadpole Willie's every Wednesday. He's like, well, I'm 25 now, and I don't really want to drink
This is less
this
fun.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop. And now he's 30, and all his friends are like, where are you, man? We're going to
back
Tadpole
on
Willie's.
Tadpoles
They're
tonight.
they're
It's like,
fighting
well-
in front of Tadpole Willies, and they're just like in the group chat, and he's still in that group chat, but he's like,
Silent.
yeah, and he's
Joe J-
he's like, like moving up in his career and becoming like really established in a company, and
Or
it's
maybe
like
he's just like happy and paints Warhammer figures.
obviously that's
Joe G's like,
would be
you
the
know,
better one.
What a loser.
Joe J, I need you to say something bad about Hassan Piker. I need you to back me up.
You're like,
I have two more questions.
I have two answers.
questions.
Yes and no, in that order.